I hope everybody's doing well this evening. You're with Jason Jordan, and tonight it's our weekly look at the Torah Parsha, and tonight we have a jam-packed show for you. Should I say study for you. David is on his way to give us little insights along the way as we go through the Parsha. Please be patient while he gets here. We have Richard and Ree. All I see is this bearded white guy. I'll take that as a yes, Richard. Shalom to Richard and Ree. Giordano can't join us tonight. He's busy. He's got something on. Anybody that's listening to the broadcast, you're welcome to be here. And if it's your first night listening to the broadcast or day, whatever it is in your part of the world, welcome and shalom. And if you don't know who we are, you might be an old schoolmate of mine or something, and you've decided to check out what's going on. Basically, we're a Nazarene group of people. Means that we're a group of people that are popping up all over the globe that are going back to the original ways and beliefs and teachings of King Messiah Yeshua, which the world calls Jesus, and his disciples and the apostles, before our faith became hijacked, became the victim of identity theft. And we went underground for a fair while. The opposing religious hijacking faith, they saw to it to kill all the member of Messiah's family. They did a pretty good job. They didn't get everybody, and there's become an unsettling or an unrest across the globe in people's hearts. There's people that have absolutely no prior knowledge of who Israel is or who the Jews are, and there's a stirring in their hearts, and it's a good thing. And we're a group in Australia that meet, and we're a product of I guess what really today is the modern day end time revival of the lost sheep gaining back their identity. And the two houses which became split from one house, the house of Israel and the house of Judah, we would probably be deemed as being the majority of us from the house of Israel, although some of us do have Jewish backgrounds and are coming back to the understanding and knowledge of who we are. And it's all happening right now as the world is plunged further and further into chaos, and we see the Muslim Brotherhood toppling all the dictatorships across the globe. We can see things are really heating up, and we've got Tetrad, we've got 4 what do you call them, blood moons coming up this year, next year and the year after. So 2014, 2015, we have blood moon on Passover, Pesach. We have a blood moon on Tabernacles, and then the next year we have another blood moon on Pesach, and then another blood moon on Tabernacles. And there's all sorts of other things happening. Basically, long story short, is that when you get things like that happening in the heavens, it's not good for Israel. It usually means a lot of blood spilt on us Israelites, whether we be Jews or we be grafted in, to the olive branch. It's not going to be good for us, but ultimately it will be good, because everything that happens for our benefit will basically turn out for good. So kind of like birth pains. Mother goes into labour, extreme birth pains, they escalate, and then finally comes out a beautiful baby boy or baby girl. You know the story. So that's sort of briefly who we are. We look at the first 5 books of the scriptures principally, called the Torah, which were written by the hand of Moshe, transmitted through the creator of the universe, and we annually look at the first 5 books, because the entirety of the scriptures, even the Netzarim Ketuvim, the Nazarene writings, Netzarim means Nazarenes, Ketuvim means writings, all of those are built on the foundation of the first 5 books of the Bible. And so we go through the first 5 books of the Bible every single year, and along the way we underscore our studies by looking at the rest of the Tanakh, otherwise known as the Old Testament, and we look at the Nazarene writings, also, which helps us underscore our understanding and knowledge. So basically we're putting scripture behind scripture, and we're cyclically studying the word. We're doing it in a cyclical fashion, and we're putting scripture behind scripture behind scripture to have a good understanding of scripture. Is the basis of any believer's walk. It's not a magic show. It's not sorcery. It's not something that you do and you get a result by punching in a bunch of numbers. It's all things that are achieved by hard yards, so to speak. And so this week we're up to Parsha Pinchas, and this, oh man, I spent most of the day trying to work out the best translation or the best pronunciation. There is Phineas, there is Pinchas, there is Pinchas. There are just a whole heap of different pronunciations, and it's the name of a zealot, son of Eleazar. He was a Levite. He was the grandson of Aaron, and obviously the son of Aaron's son Eleazar. And he does something in this week's Parsha, and it kind of puts him on the map, so to speak. And there's even a memorialization of him written about in the book of Psalms, in Psalm 106, verse 30-31. There's a reference to what he did. And he halted a plague and saved many lives. We're going to get to that in a second. Each Parsha is named after the first significant word in every breakup. As you know, the first 5 books of the Bible are Genesis, Exodus, and Numbers, and Leviticus, and then Deuteronomy. Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. And these books are split up to go over annual readings. There is a triennial reading, which is 3.5 years, which some congregations do, which is very good, which mirrors the 3.5-year ministry of King Messiah Yeshua, which is pretty cool. Okay, I'm just going to have a quick look on Facebook here and see if my broadcast is coming through okay. I've had nothing from you, Richard, so I'm forging ahead, assuming that everybody can hear me and see me loud and clear. So, first thing to do is to discuss what happened last week. You're never going to have a good solid understanding of what you're studying at a given point in time unless you go back and look at what got you here. Very good, you can hear me loud and clear, that's great. A good rabbi, when he sits down with his students, will expect his student to tell him what he learned last time he was taught by his rabbi, by his teacher. And so we're going to sort of adopt that sort of vein, and we'll have a look at what happened last week. Last week the Parsha was called Balak, and Balak was an evil chieftain of a country who were very afraid of Israel because they're about to enter into the Promised Land. And he pretty much knew that it was pointless to go up against Israel in a stand-up fight. And he did a bit of research, and he found out that the Gentiles, the nations, had somebody who was kind of a counterpart to Moses, was given the ability to have personal conversations with the creative universe like Moshe was, and he was still, he ended up becoming quite an evil sort of a guy. And but whatever he blessed was blessed, whatever he cursed was cursed. And so he basically hired him to curse the nation of Israel. And in doing that Israel would be hamstrung and wouldn't be able to. We learned about Balaam and his inability to understand that no means no. Yes, we did. That's exactly right. And I love how you're cutting to the chase there, Richard. That's indeed true. So now it's 40 years since the Exodus, and Israel's poised to enter the Promised Land, like I said. The neighbouring countries, Moab and Midian, fiercely loathe Israel. They're this strange wandering nation that have been wandering in the desert for 40 years, and they're got this pillar of fire by night, pillar of cloud by day, food's falling from the sky, the seas are parting when they need to go through rivers or seas or waters or whatever. Some of them are dying, some good things are happening, they're winning battles, but they're just, all in all, they're, to a foreign eye, if you're not impressed like Jethro was, then you're pretty unnerved by this nation. If they're heading your way, yeah, you start to shake in your shoes. And so prior, in the last Torah portion that we read, we had two major nations get dealt a fairly significant blow. We have Shikon and we have Og, being the kings or chieftains of their countries. And they were kind of like the protective nations for the Moabites and the Midianites. And they're kind of fallen down by the wayside, so you can sort of see these guys are really trying to pull anything they can to get Israel to sort of go away, but they won't. So yes, Balak's got this special skill. He's a sorcerer. He's employed by Balaam. Balaam is a sorcerer. He's employed by Balak. That's what happens when you have similar characters with similar sounding names. So you can tell this was a real story. It wasn't written by some really clever author that made sure the names are all different and the characters all had sort of easy to identify traits, although they do. So he goes to curse Israel. But he basically gets to the first vantage point and looking out over the encampment of Israel, and he's unable to do so. And Yahweh warns him several times not to go. And we call our Creator by the Tetragrammaton name Yahweh. We believe the pronunciation is Yahweh, where we believe in proclaiming the name. We don't believe in overusing the name and using the name in a common fashion. But we certainly believe in speaking the name, especially when it comes to the study of Torah and discussing our faith with people and so on and so forth. We believe that one of the things, the revelations that are going to come to the last generation is the revelation of the names of both the Son and the Father. So that's what Yahweh means for those of you that have just joined us. So, or don't know really what's going on. So the prophet Moshe was perceived by Balak to be somebody, because he had a speech utterance that he got when he was a child. There was an incident that happened with Pharaoh. This is in the Bible, so don't start going flicking through your Bible trying to find this. But there was an incident, let's just leave it at that, and he had a speech impediment. But he was a very influential speaker. And so Balak sort of understood this and realized that if he could employ Balaam, who was an expert in blessing and cursing things, objects, peoples or individuals, whatever, he could kind of fight fire with fire. So you can kind of see how he was trying to play it out. So anyway, Balaam goes to several vantage points and tries to curse the nation. And as he looks out over the nation, he sees their tents beautifully arranged and pitched in a way that the opening of one tent doesn't look directly into the opening of another tent. So Balaam could see there was great modesty within the people, there was great respect for privacy and so on and so forth. And so he was moved to say, how lovely are your tents, O Yaakov, O Jacob, who is the progenitor of the nation, the first forefather, well, one of the first forefathers. And so he gets an idea, even though he's moved in a righteous way, and he's rightly touched, and his heart is pricked, and what he's liking is something that is good, and he utters goodness from his mouth, and some of his utterances are actually incorporated in some of the praise and worship and some of our chants and so on and so forth that we say on Sabbath. He was still inherently a wicked individual, and it didn't take much time for him to realize an evil opportunity in his revelation of seeing how the Israelites' tents were arrayed. And what the revelation, because he had a spirit of he had a spirit of prophecy, but it was kind of like a wicked spirit of prophecy that had come upon him. So it was giving him prophetic visions, but it was sort of tainting them with evil rather than with good. So though he could genuinely see the future and he had a genuine communication still with the Almighty, he would sort of always appear to pervert whatever it was that he got. And we see that kind of perfected when we sort of meet him finally, when he has his tussle with the Israelites, or he gets employed by Balak. And so he realizes that the Israelites hold a great emphasis on personal modesty and privacy. And so he thought that if he could cut through into the personal sanctity or the barrier that is the basic personal boundary of privacy of any person, let alone an Israelite, he could actually make an opening, or make a dent, if you like. And so he saw that opening in the form of a pagan god, if you like, called Baal Peor, which means master of the opening. So literally he found an opening or an avenue to expose the nakedness and invade the privacy of every Israelite man and ultimately Israelite woman within the encampment. And he would do this by suggesting that Balak bring the most beautiful women of his nation and of the nation of the Moabites and the Midianites, and get them to entice the Israelite men to have sexual relations, and in the course of doing so, get them to bow to the idols which were effigies of Baal Peor. And this would make Yahweh really angry, because the Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, the mighty one of Israel, holds nothing more. Holds nothing more sacred than the purity of somebody's physical being, and morality is the highest sort of form of walking out holiness. So and it kind of works. Initially we see that it appears to be working, and it's really interesting how they do it. The attack was orchestrated by setting up a huge market located just outside the Israelite encampment, and it was tended primarily by foreign elderly women. The men of Israel would come into the camp and they'd look at an array of impressive wares and goods. The elderly woman would then usher the Israelite men who were impressed with the wares that were so cheap and so well made into the rear of their tents, and then they would introduce them to these beautiful women, young, succulent, beautiful temptresses. And then they would begin to seduce the men en masse. So they would see, first the men would see a marketplace, good wares that were very good, very, what do you mean, like, just, they were very well priced. And then they would see the sellers were beautiful women, not at first, but when they were taken back into the rear of the tents, they would see that ultimately they were dealing with beautiful women. And you can see there's an ascending series of enticements, and it's so clever. If it wasn't so evil, it'd be such a clever thing. And I guess you can still call it a clever thing. And that's the way the evil inclination likes to work. It will try and progressively get you to sin, especially in the area of sexual immorality. It'll try to do it slowly and subtly if it can't do it quickly and swiftly with an individual. So it can often work in stages. So the first one, you might have it say, you may certainly travel on a road that passes by the den of a harlot, as a prostitute, and so sure, it will not affect you because you're a man of strong character. That's what the evil inclination says. So you travel across this road, down this road, past a house of sin, a den of iniquity, or whatever you want to call it. And then the evil inclination says, you may look into the windows of the den of iniquity because you're strong enough not to be led astray. So you begin taking this route home. It might be home from work or on the way to work or whatever, or to see a friend or whatever it is. It might even be on the way to shul for Shabbos. And so then you begin to get accustomed to looking into the windows of this house when you drive by. And so then now it's got you at two stages. At first you wouldn't go nowhere near it, now you're driving past it, now you're looking in the windows of it. So the evil inclination is very subtle, it's very slow, and it's very cunning, and you've got to be very careful. And we can learn a lot from how the inclination works in this way. And then finally the evil inclination says, it's okay for you to talk to these women because you're a strong man, you can greet these harlots as you go by the way. And then it goes on to say, and if they invite you in for a drink, you can go and have a drink as long as it's not alcoholic or anything like that. So now you've moved from not even going anywhere near it to actually speaking with them, and on occasion going into the actual locality, this den of iniquity. And then you can see it's only just a small step to go the whole way. So the evil inclination works like that, and that's how Balaam, that's what Balaam suggested to Balak to get in play, to get these Israelite men to sin. So it's very, very, very smart of them, and it's probably one of the most effective attacks that the foreign nations have on Israel in their journey in the wilderness. Excuse me while I just have some of my Milo. So, what happens? Well, a lot of the men, particularly men of great standing within the community, they fall prey to this, and sort of orgies begin to ensue. And this is not just your common lay person within the congregation. You have Zimri, of the tribe of Shimon. He takes a daughter of royalty, a Midianite woman by the name of Cosbi, and he brings her out just after Moshe and Aaron make a declaration that they're going to have everybody executed that have partaken in these orgies and these promiscuous relationships with foreigners. So he brings Cosbi out, Zimri brings Cosbi out, and publicly go into a tent before the whole community to, do the wild thing. And Moshe is absolutely, he's beside himself with grief. So he literally starts crying, and all the nobles and the elders of Israel are standing by, looking at what's going to occur, and it's going to cause a domino effect of big ideas to actually sweep through the community. And we've seen it recently in the last couple of years within the Netzarim community or the wider Messianic community, with things come into the camp, polygamy or plural marriage as it's called, which does have, there are biblical accounts of polygamy, and I'd like to call it polygamy. I don't like to give it a nice sanctified name like plural marriage, or what's the other one? It's, these names they give these things to make them sound like they're legitimate, righteous things. Patriarchal marriage is one of the other ones. It makes me sick. But the interesting thing is, all accounts of polygamous relationships, even David's his relationships with his concubines and so on, none of these end up having positive consequences for the patriarchs. They all bring with them iniquities that emerge in their lives and the lives of their children. We see Solomon, it become full-blown in David's son Solomon with his taking of hundreds of wives. And it was a real issue. David's iniquity was certainly, I guess polygamy, I guess sexual, immoral thing, and so it's not a good thing. And we read in Torah the laws governing more than one wife are permissive things within the Torah, but there are things that are probably there to utilize people coming in who already have several wives. You have Bedouins which have several wives. They want to come into the household of faith. What are we going to tell them? Okay, well, you pick the best out of your 5 wives that you've got, and the other ones can all live on the street as beggars. They're Israelites, sure, but they can't be your wives. You've got to pick one. Or we've got to support all these women now as like akin to widows. So we can see that there has to be some form of provision for multiple partners, if you like. But a couple of years ago, and I still think it's going on within the community to a lessened extent, we have people that are trying to manipulate the Torah and trying to write in the Heavenly Father's permissive will at the very least, and to get away with things like that. And it's not something, especially things to do with immorality. It's not something that the Heavenly Father has much patience with, as we'll see. Okay, so don't get me wrong, the Heavenly Father is long-suffering, but it is this particular area, and I think it's because it leads to something that causes a seed to grow and generations to ensue. It's not like a sin that is an intellectual sin or something like that. This type of sin can perpetually lead to broken marriages, broken homes, and so on and so forth, if things aren't done in an orderly sort of situation. So Moshe sets up these tribunals to punish the adulterers. Zimri and Cosby go into the tent, and nobody does anything. Moshe, the leader, is crying, and you have this one guy, this son of Eleazar, quite a young man at the time. He starts to appeal to the strong men and the heroes within the community. Do something. Do something. The Midrash says he actually asks, goes around and he asks, something's got to be done, something's got to be done. And he finds that no one's going to do anything. Nobody knows halakhically what they should do, or in terms of Torah what they should do. And so he snatches a spear or a lance, and then he charges into the tent, and he runs Zimri, the head of the tribe of Shimon, and his consort Cosby. He runs them both through with the spear, killing them instantly. The Midrash says, and if you look carefully at the scriptures, there is support there to say that the area of impalement was in the stomach or near the genitalia area. So this man wasn't mucking around, and it might have looked to the untrained eye like a crime of passion. And so he was known as a zealot. Somebody has zeal, who acts with passion without his any type of concern for his own reputation. And it would have been quite an intense moment. His action, Pinhas's action of impaling both people through the genitalia, the Midrash describes, halted a fatal plague that had begun to rip through the children of Israel as a result of Yahweh's displeasure. Before we can hope to sufficiently explain why this act of violence was seen as righteousness by the Almighty, because somebody might easily say, oh, this guy these people didn't even have a trial, they didn't even, there was no discussion, they were just killed in the very act. So we must examine who Pinhas was, and his nature, and what was in doing that, find out what his motive was. So Pinhas was the son of Eleazar, as I've said several times now, and Eleazar was the son of Aaron. His mother's father was Jethro, who was a Midianite, a pagan priest, high priest, and before his conversion, obviously. And this aspect of Pinhas's lineage was an area of ridicule by some of the Israelite people, according to the medieval sage Rashi. He describes a popular saying that emerged: "Have you seen this son of a fattener, the fattener of calves, whose mother fattened calves for idolatrous sacrifices, and now goes and kills a prince of Israel?" So that's pretty damning sort of things that were being said. Now, the reason for the mocking, though he'd saved Israel from a costly plague, and we can't forget this, that what he did ceased a plague that was just travelling through the nation and killing people at that time. It just swept through everybody. It was the mocking was due to skepticism, and the skepticism was partly derived from his ancestral lineage. Many did not know of the law of the zealot, which didn't help. but there was asked, why is it that no one, not even Moshe or any of the elders or the entire leadership or any of the heroes within the encampment, became moved to assume this role that Pinhas did from nowhere? And this guy was pretty much a nobody until this event. And he was the youngest of the family at the time. So they wondered if Pinhas was just an angry man who found a way to vent his frustrations and vent his rage. And that's what I was talking about before. You find people that look at the Torah and the iniquity develops in a person. And they begin to look at the Torah, and it's usually as an after-study exercise, so they'll keep their normal routine for a while, and they'll see if they can put Torah to whatever it is their iniquity is grating on them to do, or is seducing them to want to do, right? And then that becomes more of the focus of their study. And we can see that when we have people focus on subjects all the time and never seem to be able to get off that subject. You might have met somebody within the Messianic community, whether it be online or in person, and they're doing something wrong. There's something in their life that's wrong, and they're trying to bring Torah into it to justify it. And as a consequence, it's all they ever seem to talk about. It's all they ever seem to be focused on. They seem to be able to speak pretty well about their situation, about how to defend themselves. But you can see now that their whole focus has gone from their love of the Father and the Son and of Israel to allowing the Torah to let their wicked and evil ways be permissible. So they're getting the Torah to allow them to act like a reprobate, if you like. And so you see this every now and then, and if you go for very long, in this faith, in this walk, you will see it. It's pretty astounding. So let's find out a little bit more. Okie dokie, where are we? Now I talked about the law of the zealot. You might be going, what's the law of the zealot? Okay. Here we go. Now, okay. Now the people wondered if Pinhas was just an angry man. The answer to this explanation of what makes one a zealot is this. When a sentence occurs after a formal trial with a sound jury, qualified judges, and competent executioners, if applicable, there is usually less need to question their motives if they are all going by the book. Yeah. But the motive of a person who takes independent action like Pinhas did, acting as a judge, jury and executioner himself, it's extremely important, because it is this motive that qualifies him to do what he did. Let me explain. The definition of a true zealot, according to Scripture, is an utterly selfless individual who is only concerned with the community's right standing before Yahweh. His own feelings, his personal prejudices and inclinations are completely subjugated to pure zealotry for the Creator. And so this is what happened to Pinhas. He was seized by a pure desire to do the Creator's will in its complete fashion, that he completely cast to the four winds all his notions of self, the way he would be perceived, or what people would say about him, or whether he would be executed himself, whether he would go into that tent and find them being very able to defend themselves and be killed in the process of trying to kill two people, or whatever the consequences. He just wanted the Heavenly Father's will to be done, rain, hail, or shine. And so this is the attribute of a zealot. This is the attribute of one who has zeal. But it's not a blind zeal. It's a zeal according to knowledge. And we're going to find out a little bit more of how his act was still very calculated and not just a blind release of his frustrations, his anger, and taking revenge into his own hands, if you like. The law of the zealot is referred to in the Mishnah as the Torah laws of forbidden relationships, as a law that's not instructed. So that's why it's not necessarily obvious in the Torah itself, this instruction. Because if a person feels that they need to approach a court to receive a backing, whether for emotional, legal, or for personal safety reasons, this desire will immediately disqualify somebody as being a zealot, or acting in a zealous nature. Pinhas was rewarded with an eternal priesthood because his act was performed without regard to his own safety, his personal reputation, or his consequences. His actions exhibited the complete nullification of his own will in the face of Yahweh's will. He was what a chariot is to its rider, because a chariot has no will of its own except the rider that actually turns and drives and goes fast or slow in that chariot. The word zealot refers to anyone who is excessively passionate or fanatically committed to a cause. And people often use the term fanaticism in a very negative sense. In fact, there's probably not many arenas where you would hear it used positively these days. It was originally used, the word zealot, as a name for Jewish patriots of the first century who sought to overthrow the occupying forces, whether they be the Romans, whether they be the Babylonians, whether they be the Assyrians, the Antiochuses, Greeks, and so on and so forth. So the etymology of the word righteous zealot, now zealot is a Greek word as zelotes or zelos, and it means like a righteous state of being. There's also another name for zealot which was being thrown around. It's another Latin term called sicari. It literally means dagger men, because these zealots, a lot of them, they were just like Pharisees that were a bit more hands-on. And you'll find that if you do a bit of research into who the zealots were, a lot of them had Pharisaic backgrounds. They were fed up of the bureaucracy that was creeping in to the Sanhedrin, and the Herodian influence, and the influence of the Sadducees, and how they'd stripped everything back, and everything was like a barren wasteland now. They wanted to go underground, and they wanted to take matters into their own hands. There was assassinations, there was infightings within the bands of the Zealots and the Sicarii and things like that. So these guys weren't to be messed with, and they were looked at by the Roman occupation, by their eye, as possibly we would look at the Taliban today. And so you've got to really, once you can sort of put your head into that headspace and then pick up scripture and read it, because all these things were going on in Messiah Yeshua's time. You had zealots, particularly in his Passion Week. There's a role that the zealots played there. There's Barabbas, who was one of the ringleaders of one of the zealous sects, and so on and so forth. And so it helps you put things into context historically, but not only that, also to sort of see that these people zealots weren't evil people. In many cases, there were people that were employed as disciples by Yeshua who had zealot backgrounds, and we'll look at that in a few minutes. In Hebrew, Pinhas was given the title Kenei ben Kenei, which means a zealot, the son of a zealot. As an organized movement, zealots first appear under the authority of Hezekiah, the father of Judas the Galilean, who had put together a band of so-called robbers which made war against the Idumean Herod at the time. A system of organized assassination was also practiced by the zealots during the reign of Herod. This is according to Jewish Encyclopedia. Now, in the Maccabean period, there was a zeal for the Torah that returned to the Jews after the horrific persecution under the Greeks, when Mattathias, also initially a lesser priest like Pinhas, he slew a fellow Jew whom he saw sacrificing to an idol. It is said that he dealt zealously for the law of Elohim, as did Pinhas unto Zimri the son of Salu. And you'll actually find that in the book of Maccabees, and I've got the address here. It's 1 Maccabees chapter 2 verse 26. It's a direct reference to Pinhas's dispatching of Zimri and his consort. And it goes on to say, where is it here? And like Pinhas, he obtained for his house a covenant of an everlasting priesthood. So Mattathias also gained the same notoriety as Pinhas did as well. And then we see Mattathias make the call, and this is again something you read about in the book of Maccabees, and that the book of Maccabees is part of the apocryphal books, which we don't particularly have a problem with. These books principally take up between the book of Malachi, the last book of the Tanakh, and the first book of the Netzrim Ketuvim, the book of Matthew, the books of the Apocrypha kind of fill that sort of 400-year void gap. And I recommend everybody have a copy of the book of the Apocrypha and study it as you do the scriptures in your library. It is going to help you very much to actually form a better picture overall of what's happening in the 66 books of the Bible that we have. And so what happens, Mattathias, he kills this guy that was about to sacrifice to a pig, and he runs to the top of the hill and he says, whoever is zealous for the Torah and keeps the covenant, let him follow me, and whoever is with Yahweh, let him come to me. And so this was his catch cry. So it was zeal. You can have knowledge, you can have zeal, and you can have zeal without knowledge, you can have knowledge without zeal. You want to have zeal with knowledge. Now, if we get anything that we've looked at tonight, and we're still about halfway, there's so much I want to say, but you get that zeal happening back in your life. Get that zing happening back in your life. Now, there's a euphoria that most of us have when we first come into the Netzrim faith, and it gives us a little bit of a push. To some degree, it makes us super Jews, and then we kind of come to our senses and realise we have our own identity. We are Nazarenes. We are a sect within Judaism that rose out, and we had our Zaydeks. We have our great Nazarenes and their writings to study, as well as the sages of the Talmud and so on and so forth. But after that initial zeal wears off, after that initial euphoria wears off, then we sometimes can find we're going through the motions again. We might be still having the same good routine with the study of Torah. We might still be praying at all the right times and so forth. But are we just sometimes going through the motions? Have we lost that zeal? Have we lost that drive a little bit? Is it ebbing away from us? Are we finding that we've caught back up with a few TV shows that we used to watch? Have we found that we're shortening our prayers are getting shorter, our conversation time in our prayer is lessened, and the more time we recite from the Siddur is increased? Are we finding that we're not talking much with fellow believers in the faith? Are we kind of finding that we're a bit isolated? Are we finding that we're not getting insights like we used to get at the rapid rate we were getting? Are we finding that it might be a few weeks before there's a new insight that gives you a new freshness to dig into the Word more? Are you incorporating what you're studying into your life? Are people that know you at work, if they found out you were somebody who was on fire for the Scriptures, as you show maybe to people on Shabbat, would they be surprised and go, I didn't think that person was even religious? So is this washing over you? Is it permeating everything you do? Not to the point of ad nauseum, so people call you a god boy or whatever like that, but you can still be a normal person. You can still watch secular television, so on and so forth, and be involved in what's happening in the world. It's about actually being aware of what's happening around you, but living within that storm and being a calm and a very calm vessel within that rough sea. Okay, so we've got the Zealots of Masada. We just looked at the Zealots of the Maccabean period. Now we've got the Zealots of Masada, and I went to Masada in 2008, and it's a big fortress built by King Herod, and it was the last stand of 900 Zealots who fought valiantly against the Romans, and it literally went on for about 4 years. But let's see if we can find out a little bit about the Zealots of Masada tonight, being on the subject of Zealots. Another famous yet tragic story of the Zealots was the Battle of Masada. After Rome destroyed the Second Temple in 70 CE, a rebellion by Jews known as the Great Revolt ended. Surviving Zealots fled Jerusalem and headed they fled Jerusalem. They headed for the fortress of Masada, which is near the Dead Sea. There they held out for 3 years. Sorry, not 4 years, it was 3 years. Anyone who has climbed the famous snake path to Masada can understand why the surrounding Roman troops had to contend themselves with a siege that lasted for this long. Masada is situated at the top of an enormous isolated rock. Anyone climbing it to attack the fortress would be an easy target, yet the Jews encamped in the fortress could never feel secure. Every morning they awoke to see Roman 10th Legion hard at work constructing battering rams, building a ramp, other siege weapons and so on and so forth, firing the odd volley of arrows up over the walls of Masada, etc., peppering them every day, psychologically wearing them down. If the 960 defenders, so there wasn't 900, there's 960, of Masada hoped that the Romans eventually would consider this last Jewish beachhead too insignificant to bother conquering. They were disappointed. Basically, the Romans poured just about every effort and resource into rout these final dissenters out as they could. So the Romans were well aware that the Zealots at Masada were the group that started the Great Revolt. Eventually, all the survivors agreed to commit mass suicide, and when Rome finally marched in over the walls, they were greeted with the sight of hundreds of bodies amid deathly silence. 4 or 5 survivors were found, old women and children, and they were allowed to live to tell the tale. And this is principally comes to us by the writings of Josephus. Josephus was from Galilee, and he commanded one of the Galilean Jewish regiments, and his forces were attacked, and he defected, and he joined the Romans and became a Hellenist, and he was a very good historian and writer, and he was allowed to continue to write and take historical documentation down of things. He writes about King Messiah Yeshua in some of his writings. Some of his writings are questioned. I've even read that some people question that the Zealots at Masada even commit suicide because, you know, Josephus sort of joined the other side and he could have fabricated stories and so on and so forth. I don't particularly think he would have done that, but there are some people that question Josephus' writings. But I recommend to get the collected works of Josephus and have these as something that is also in your library for reference as well. Because if you study the historical background or backdrop of the scriptures, Josephus is the best person to go to for that, and it's just going to help your understanding of scripture so much. Okay, let's talk about the 2 thieves. Now these are talked about a lot within Christendom. The 2 thieves were crucified along with King Messiah Yeshua. Original Greek attests them as being brigands, a common epitaph for Jewish zealots. The original Greek word used for the thieves is lestai, which meant robbers, but was synonymous with zealot. Lestai was an official Greek designation for the term zealots. Barabbas or Barnaba, the Jew who was set free in Yeshua's place, was the leader of a faction of sword-wielding Jewish zealots who had caused many uprisings against Rome. The organised zealot movements at that time were spawned from a breakaway sect of Pharisees, like I said. Many Pharisees, usually in secret, supported the zealot causes. The zealot movement Barabbas was associated with was called the Sicarii, the dagger men. This was a term applied in the decades immediately preceding the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. They were considered as an extremist splinter group of Jewish zealots. They were probably called a similar term as insurgents, as we would call insurgents today over in Iraq. They attempted to expel the Romans and their partisans from Judea